Hello, it's Deena Thomson, author of Fallen Poppies, and this is chapter 43. This is chapter 44.
Chapter 43. He is dreaming. Alan Michael is with Mara Joy, laughing. Blood covers everything he sees. He looks down on her as she laughs hysterically, arms stretched out. She is dripping with blood from head to toe. Alan Michael stares at his own body. He is naked and blanketed in blood also. A knife is clasped in his right hand. Blood drips lazily from the pointed tip of the razor-sharp edge. "Mara Joy," he says dreamily. She veers away from him, hair flowing out behind her. A blood-soaked hand motions him to follow. He does. It feels like he is floating on a wave of red. He can hear her tinkling laugh through his deep breathing as she gets farther and farther away from him. He hurries his pace, bent on catching up to her. He turns a scarlet-drenched corner and stops dead in his tracks. She stands still above a blood-sodden mass. He moves slowly to her, his heart racing as it floats toward his goal with each step. She smiles at him and giggles, looking down at the bloody pulp at her feet. Alan Michael gazes down at what she is concentrating on. Joanna lies in a heap of blood and gore. Her eyes are blank and staring. Life has gone from them. Her tongue rolls from her mouth grotesquely. A large gaping wound pumps blood slowly from her neck. His head snaps back up to Mara Joy. She is naked, blood sprinkled all over her exposed torso. "You've done it, Mikey. I told you you could do it," she says in a faraway voice. Her hands lift from behind her hips and extend out toward him. She pulls his nude body to her, undisturbed by the corpse of Joanna lying between them. "You did it, my love," she says, leaning in and kissing his wet lips. Drops begin to fall onto their locked faces. Suddenly, rain begins to pour on top of their naked bodies. Alan Michael opens his eyes to the rain falling inside the blood-drenched room. It's not rain. It's blood. Joanna's blood. Mara Joy tilts back her head and raises her arms high, squealing with delight. Drops of blood race down her naked form, leaving red streaks. Alan Michael lifts his head to the downpour of blood and laughs out loud too. "Mikey," she says softly, pulling his head down to her waiting lips. "I am yours." She plunges her cool, wet tongue into his mouth, hungrily searching for his waiting one. She finds it and sucks on it thirstily. He grasps her shoulders tightly, pulling her small frame onto his. His desire prods her with full force. She tosses back her head and moans, grasping his stiff shaft. He groans with heated passion, pulling her down onto the bloody floor. He is on top of her in a flash. Mara Joy squirms like a wild beast beneath him, blood sloshing under her back. "Now, Mikey, now!" she gasps, forcefully guiding him into her. "Now!" She arches her back, displaying her jutting breasts soaked with blood. He pounces on her forcefully, pounding her harder and harder. She cries out, cackling, raking her painted fingers down his bloody back. His pleasure is mounting higher and higher. The intensity of his desire grows stronger and stronger. He feels his buttocks tighten in anticipation of his climax. Something wet and slimy wraps firmly around his ankle. He ignores it and continues to enjoy himself on the withering creature wailing beneath him. Mara Joy calls out his name, gripping her hands firmly on his pumping rump. His head falls back, enthralled in his work at hand. Eyes closed, He feels something moist and sticky touching his face gently. He opens his eyes, not wanting to miss seeing Mara Joy bloom. He looks down to see her startled face gazing past him, her hands clasped to her mouth. She looks green with fright. "Mara Joy," he says, confused by her behavior. She points behind him and begins to scream. He turns around, sensing the sickly sweet smell of putrid waste. To his horror, Joanna is crouched behind him, her body arched perfectly to his. Blood oozes from the open gape in her neck. Her vacant green eyes stare blankly out at him. Deep from within her extended mouth, her voice bubbles through. "Why, brother? Why?" The inhumane voice filters out. Alan Michael sat straight up in bed, heart pounding in his throat. He was soaking wet with his own perspiration. Joanna's dead voice still echoing in his head, her dead eyes burning into him. "It was just a dream. A horrible dream." He panted, relieved. He looked at the clock on the bedstand. It was 3:13 in the morning. He lay back down on his damp pillow, dropping his head gently to the soft folds of feathers. He closed his eyes and visualized Mara Joy. His lips couldn't help curving into an evil smile. Joanna and her dead eyes already forgotten. Chapter 44. Mara Joy took a deep breath before entering her parents' home. She had called them earlier that morning to tell them that Pauline had spent the night at her house. Confused, JoBeth and Alan accepted the fact, as odd as it seemed. Mara Joy and Pauline had never been close, but if they were starting to form a bond, JoBeth and Alan were all for it. They wanted all their children to get along with each other, and maybe this was a step in the right direction. Mara Joy snubbed out her cigarette with her shoe and straightened up, her hand briefly resting on her flat abdomen. Her heart fluttered like a bird in a cage, and she smiled in spite of herself. Larry had really come through with his promises about speaking to a doctor. The problem was rectified almost immediately. A trip to the specialist had led to some painful procedures. Apparently, the doctor had been able to fix the problem. She was now free to get pregnant, and with Larry's help, that was exactly what she did. She was beside herself with happiness. At long last, she would have what she always dreamed of having, a child of her own. Larry couldn't believe the change in his wife. She was so grateful. She doted on him like never before. When she found out she was pregnant, it was like Christmas Day had arrived. She was even friendly to Anne and Bobby Joe. If having a child made Mara Joy that happy, Larry figured she could have as many children as she wanted. Mara Joy cleared her throat and opened the front door. She entered the kitchen and instantly saw Alan Michael seated at the kitchen table eating his morning cereal. "Hello, little brother," she chirped, dropping her purse on the table and shrugging off her mink coat. "It's a beautiful day. You should go outside and get some fresh air. You look a little dead." Alan Michael looked up from his bowl of cereal and stared at her, open-mouthed. He jumped when her voice reached his ear, not expecting to see her so early in the morning. He felt a sudden rush of heat in his chest, remembering the dream he had woken up from, its lingering presence like a dull open wound in his head. "What are you doing here?" he asked, mouth gaping. She plunked down in the kitchen chair closest to him. She removed a cigarette package from her purse, retrieving a long, white, tobacco-filled cylinder. Snapping the case shut, she lit up her smoke as she squinted her eyes mysteriously at Alan Michael. "I came to see our parents, if that is all right," she said, grinning through the smoke. "What on earth is eating you?" "Nothing. I just didn't sleep well last night," he murmured, spooning up his cereal. He stuffed a heaping spoon into his mouth and munched loudly. "Alan Michael, please." Mara Joy scrunched up her face, repulsed. Mouth shut! Her stomach churned. He complied, wiping milk from his mouth with the back of his hand. You seem in a good mood. What's up with you? He asked, still chomping on his food. Can't a girl be happy on such a wonderful day? She breathed. What happened? Did Joanna drop dead or something? Alan Michael laughed into his bowl of cornflakes. Mara Joy was taken off guard. It was in her behavior to make ugly comments about Joanna's life or lack of it, but it all seemed frivolous now that she was going to have a baby. Everything was different now that she would have her own child. She didn't really want Chad back if she thought about it. He had no money to speak of. He definitely had no power. Larry, on the other hand, had both. He had money to give Mara Joy a child of her own. He had the money and power to set Pauline up in a private hospital room with no questions asked from the staff. Pauline's life wouldn't be destroyed because of the power Larry possessed. She wouldn't have to marry Pascal because she was pregnant. That problem was probably already disposed of, and no backstreet butcher would perform her abortion. Oh no, only the best doctor would treat Pauline. Larry made sure of it. Pauline would never have to worry about that little troll again. Larry had taken care of him with just a few phone calls. Mara Joy was certain Pascal would disappear, never to bother Pauline again. That was the kind of power Larry wielded. When Mara Joy thought about it, it was kind of a blessing in disguise to be rid of Chad. He'd always been wimpy and never able to give her the lifestyle she needed to have. If she was honest with herself, she would have eventually left him on her own, outgrown him and his weaknesses. She needed a man, and Chad had always been a boy in a man's body, boo-hooing about all the wrongs done to him. A man baby. She shrugged her shoulders and puffed on her cigarette. For once, Joanna has nothing to do with my mood, Mara Joy said, enlightened. She might not want Chad any longer, but it was going to take a lot more to forgive Joanna for what she had done to her. Well, what is it? Alan Michael asked, raising one broad eyebrow, starting to feel uneasy. Mara Joy was acting in a way he wasn't familiar with, and it frightened him. Never mind, nosy, Mara Joy teased. Are the folks up? She asked, looking at the door that went to the rest of the house. He nodded, not enjoying being left out of Mara Joy's secret. She always included him. Why was it different now? Why did Pauline stay at your house? His voice was tinged with a nasty tone. Mara Joy's blue eyes snapped back at him. My, Mikey, if I didn't know better, I would say that you are behaving like a jealous little boy. She smiled wickedly, loving toying with him. It was so easy. He was such simple prey, putty in her hands. Alan Michael pushed himself angrily away from the table and stood up, disgusted. I'm not jealous. He tried to contain his voice from yelling. It's just that you're acting weird and like you're up to something, and you don't want to share it with me. She rolled her crystal blue eyes. Sit down, before you hurt yourself, she said. He continued to stand, his chest moving up and down furiously. Oh, for crying out loud, she sighed, crushing out her cigarette in the ashtray. You are worse than a baby. I'm up to nothing. Now sit down and relax. You are starting to bother me. He sat down slowly, his breathing shallow. His face felt hot and clammy. You haven't been planning things without me, have you? He asked, hands firmly gripping the wooden table. What things? Honestly, Alan Michael, I don't know what you are talking about. Mara Joy replied with exasperation. He was becoming increasingly paranoid and demanding. She didn't like it, and it was starting to get on her nerves. It had been fun conspiring with him against Joanna all these years. She had no one except him to vent to about her pain and anguish over Joanna running off with Chad, but he was pushing too much now. He was obsessed with Mara Joy and with pleasing her. It was starting to feel boring. You know, things about Joanna? Alan Michael's eyes roamed the room, fearful of eavesdroppers. There's nothing I can do about her. Mara Joy sighed, tired of the whole matter. We might as well get used to it and move on with our lives. Good idea, Jo Beth's voice said from the doorway. Both Alan Michael and Mara Joy were startled. Jo Beth stood smiling at her two favorite children. That is just the thing I have been praying for, she said. It would please me immensely for you and Alan Michael to bury the hatchet with Joanna. Oh, Mama, don't be thanking any lucky stars yet, Mara Joy said, standing up and smoothing out her navy blue dress. Alan Michael couldn't believe his ears. This was not the Mara Joy he knew and loved. He sat with his mouth open, appalled. Had she just given up hope? Had Joanna won and Mara Joy lost? He shook his head in disbelief. I'm going upstairs, he said to the two women. They nodded, not really paying attention. I'll see you later, Mikey, Mara Joy said, not bothering to look at his large form leaving the room. He bumped into Alan as he ascended the stairs. Good morning, son, Alan said, cheerfully slapping Alan Michael's back. It made a solid thudding sound. Yeah, morning, Alan Michaels said, distractedly, as he continued to his room. Everything seemed unreal. Could he have heard Mara Joy right? He collapsed on his bed and closed his eyes. His mind was jumbled with questions. Had Mara Joy forgiven Joanna? No, she told their mother not to count her lucky stars. He lurched upright in bed, his eyes glazed and unfocused. A demented smile spread across his face. Mara Joy hadn't said she forgave their whore of a sister. She just felt there was nothing she could do about her. Nothing Mara Joy could do about her, but maybe something Alan Michael could do. He wondered what she would do if he took care of her Joanna problem for good. Images of his dream from the night before filtered through his head, and he moaned out loud. He pressed a hand firmly onto his growing crotch. He would do anything for her. Anything. Where is Pauline? Alan asked, entering the small kitchen. Mara Joy and Jo Beth were seated together at the table, each sipping a coffee. Alan went to the pot, grabbed an old-fashioned white mug, and filled it to the brim with steaming black liquid. He took a seat next to Mara Joy. The steam from the cup lifted up in wispy swirls as he scanned her face, waiting for her response. Well, that is why I am here, she said, glancing between her parents. I have something to say on behalf of Pauline to both of you, and I'm not sure how you two are going to take it. This doesn't sound good, Jo Beth replied. What is going on? Well, it's like this, Mara Joy said, mustering up her best poker face. Pauline has been unhappy here for some time. What? Both Alan and Jo Beth remarked in unison. Mara Joy raised her hand in protest. Now, she doesn't mean here with the two of you. Alan and Jo Beth relaxed and listened patiently. She has been unhappy with her life here. I mean her life with that creep, Pascal. Mara Joy looked at Alan, knowing his feelings toward Pauline's boyfriend. And now that she is finished with school, she wants to do more with herself than become a wife and mother. She paused, always conscious of the reaction of her parents. Pauline wants something different than the rest of us. She wants to be a career girl. There, she said it. Now she sat back and waited to see if Alan and Jo Beth bought it. They sat silent for a moment. What kind of career girl does she hope to be?" JoBeth asked, not sure what to say. This seemed sudden. Pauline had never expressed any desire to have a job before. "Well, she isn't sure herself, Ma," Mara Joy continued. "How is she going to be a career girl if she doesn't even know what she wants to do?" Alan interrupted. "That is where I come into the picture." Mara Joy took a deep breath and decided to light another cigarette. "A few weeks ago, Pauline came to my house devastated. Pascal had asked her to marry him, and she didn't know how to say no." Alan and JoBeth nodded, except for the part about Pauline going to Mara Joy's house. This was easy to believe. They had both felt it was just a matter of time before Pauline told them she was going to marry Pascal. "Imagine my surprise seeing Pauline standing outside my door, crying." Mara Joy continued, sensing their trepidation. "At first, I thought, why did she come to me? Why not Constance or even Joanna?" She took a puff of her cigarette, letting each sentence soak into her parents' minds. "But then I realized why she couldn't go to them. They are happy being just wives, and Pascal is Constance's brother-in-law. It made sense. I'm the only one she could go to. I know the hard reality of life. I know what it is like to be in a bad marriage." JoBeth looked surprised. She had never heard Mara Joy say her marriage to Chad had been bad before. "So, naturally, I was the most logical choice for her to come to for help," Mara Joy said, swinging her cigarette as she talked. "I brought her into the house and calmed her down. Finally, she told me how she felt about Pascal, that she didn't love him and she definitely did not want to marry him. She then confided to me how she wanted to do more with her life, become more than just a wife." Mara Joy examined her parents' faces. They were both pale, unable to digest all she was saying, but they were listening intently. "I got to thinking to myself," she resumed. "How can I help Pauline? I don't want her to marry Pascal. I don't really like the fellow much. I think Pauline deserves better than him." "Hear, hear," Alan piped in. JoBeth suppressed a laugh. She had to admit, she felt relieved that Pauline didn't want to spend the rest of her life with that particular young man either. Mara Joy rolled her tongue around her mouth, triumphantly. She'd won them over to her side. She knew her parents would agree to anything she said now. "So, I asked her, 'What do you want to do with your life?' And do you know what she said?" Mara Joy asked, leaning in closer to her parents. "No," JoBeth said dully, "and I'm afraid to ask." "She said she wanted to go to college." Mara Joy slammed her hand down onto the table. "College?" Alan said in disbelief. "She's not the type of girl to go to college." JoBeth blinked her eyes and pursed her lips at Alan. "What type of girl goes to college, Alan?" she asked, a little annoyed. "Come on, JoBeth. Pauline is sweet, but we both know she hasn't got what it takes to go to college." "Why is that? Pauline is just as smart as the next girl." JoBeth defended her daughter. Everyone took Pauline's naivete for stupidity, and she did not like it, not one bit. Just because Pauline was innocent didn't make her brainless. "I love her dearly, too, but Pauline is not as smart as the average girl." "Well, I beg to differ with you, Alan. I think Pauline would do just fine in college," JoBeth stated, and sipped her coffee, effectively ending the conversation. "Mama, I have to agree with you." "Sorry, Papa," Mara Joy said. "That is why Larry and I have decided to send Pauline to school." "What?" JoBeth and Alan asked in unison once again. "The three of us, Larry, Pauline, and I, discussed it last night, and we feel that she would be best off in college. There's a good one that Larry knows of, and he made all the arrangements. It is already done. Pauline will be enrolled in the next session come next month." Mara Joy paused, letting the information sink in. "Who said you could do this?" Jo Beth asked, stiffly clutching her steaming mug. "Pauline did, Mama," Mara Joy replied. "I also have to tell you that Larry has already taken her to the school. We felt it best that she leaves town as soon as possible so that Pascal couldn't influence her to stay." "Mara Joy," Alan said, running his hand through his hair. "I don't understand why you did this behind our backs." "Listen to your attitude, Pa. You don't think Pauline can do it. She knows you love her, but she doesn't need to hear you say she is only smart enough to be a wife. Why wouldn't she keep it from you?" Mara Joy asked, looking at her bewildered father. This was going too smoothly. Everything was falling into place, nice and neat. Alan felt ashamed. She was right. He would have discouraged Pauline. "Now, what do we do?" Jo Beth asked in a daze. Another child had run from her with hidden secrets. Mara Joy looked at her mother and felt a small amount of pity for her. She didn't know that Pauline was in a hospital recovering from a beating and preparing for an abortion. She didn't know that everything had taken place only a few hours ago, not weeks, like Mara Joy had made it seem. What could she do but hide the real truth from them? It was what Pauline wanted. "You don't need to do anything, Ma. It's already done,"